You know that feeling when you see a news story about another grid failure or you open your power bill and it's just shockingly high? It really feels like we're stuck with a system that's, well, broken. But what if the problem isn't really the poles and wires? What if it's the actual rules we're using to run the whole thing? Today, we're going to dive into a totally new way of thinking about our electric grid, one that's grounded in, of all things, physics. I mean, just look at it. Our grid is this incredible feat of engineering, this massive, interconnected machine. But that complexity is also its biggest weakness. We're seeing more and more failures, more blackouts, more volatility. And, it's easy to point the finger at old equipment or bad weather, but the real root cause might actually be the market itself. And that really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? It's the big question we're trying to answer here. Why do our power bills swing around so wildly? And why does this system that we depend on for literally everything feel so fragile? Well, the answer, it turns out, connects the fundamental physics of electricity directly to your wallet. So here's our game plan. We're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at exactly why the grid is failing at a market level. Then we'll get into the specific physics that our current markets just completely ignore. After that, we'll introduce a new kind of market design, see how it actually works, and finally, we'll reimagine what your power bill could, and maybe should, look like. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. The central idea here is that this isn't an engineering problem. Our engineers are brilliant. They know how to keep the lights on. The problem is that the economic rules, the market we've built, is more and more out of sync with the physical reality of the grid. So, to make up for this gap between the market and reality, grid operators have to use this ever-growing list of complicated and expensive patches. You hear these wonky terms like uplift or redispatch. Just think of them as emergency financial band-aids that get slapped on after the market has already failed to produce a result that actually works in the real world. It's a huge sign that the core system just isn't doing its job. Okay, so this gets us to the real heart of the issue. The reason our markets need so many of these band-aids is because they're designed to treat electricity like any other commodity, like barrels of oil or bushels of wheat. But it's not. Electricity has these really unique physical properties that you just can't pretend aren't there. And this is the first mind-bending thing you have to get. You can't just stick electricity in a warehouse. The instant it's made, it has to be used. Supply has to equal demand everywhere, all the time. This means the grid isn't really a marketplace for a pile of goods. It's a real-time balancing act for the right to use a very constrained physical system. Now, this distinction is absolutely crucial. Power, that's measured in megawatts. Think of it as the speed or rate you're using electricity right now. That's what actually puts stress on the grid's wires and transformers. But what do you pay for? You pay for energy in megawatt hours, the total amount you used over a whole month. Our markets are obsessed with pricing energy, but the grid's failures are almost always caused by issues with power. So what does this mean? It means running out of electricity isn't just one simple thing. Scarcity can pop up in all sorts of ways. You could have a traffic jam, a bottleneck on a single transmission line that makes a giant power plant totally useless. Or maybe generators can't ramp up fast enough. Scarcity can happen anywhere on the grid for lots of different physical reasons. All right, so if the old market design is the root of the problem, what's the fix? This brings us to a really interesting new concept, something called the automatic market maker, or AMM for short. It's basically a whole new blueprint for a market, one that's designed from the ground up to actually respect the physics we've been talking about. And this quote right here, this is the entire philosophy in a nutshell. It is a fundamental shift in how we think about this. Instead of trying to force a physical system to behave like an abstract financial market, the AMM builds a market that's designed to serve the needs of that physical system. Physics comes first. So this new rulebook is built on 4 core promises. Okay, rule number 1, and this is the big one, physical feasibility is never violated. The market simply cannot produce a result that the grid can't physically handle, period. Second, costs follow physical cause, so payments are tied to who or what actually creates costs on the system. Third, fairness isn't just a hopeful outcome, it's literally built into the math of the algorithm. And fourth, risk is brought out into the open, made explicit, so we can actually manage it instead of just reacting to emergencies. So how does this thing actually work? Let's pop the hood and get into the mechanics. The AMM is really smart because it breaks the whole problem down into 3 clear logical layers. It separates what's possible from what's valuable, and what's valuable from who actually gets paid.
So it all starts with the feasibility layer. First, and only first, it figures out what is physically possible given every single constraint on the grid. Only after that does the value layer kick in to figure out, okay, what did we actually accomplish? And then finally, the allocation layer has the job of figuring out who gets paid based on who actually contributed to making that success possible.
And this right here is a total game changer. Our current system often just pays the last, most expensive power plant that got turned on. The AMM asks a much smarter question. How did each piece of the system contribute to the successful outcome? Think about it like a group project in school. The old way might only give an A+ to the person who wrote the very last sentence. The AMM figures out how much everyone's contribution, from the research to the rough draft to the final editing, made the whole project a success. And this visualizes that difference perfectly. On the left, that's the old way, the merit order stack, where the price is set by the last guy in line, no matter what. But on the right, you see the AMM's network view. It sees the whole picture. It understands that generator 1 and generator 2 might be just as critical as generator 3, because without them, the network couldn't have delivered the power in the first place. They all contributed. Okay, let's bring this all home to what really matters for all of us, the monthly bill. How does all this talk about physics and market design translate into a bill that is actually predictable, transparent, and fair for you? Yeah, this probably looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? A total mess. It's a jumble of base charges, energy costs, weird fuel adjustments, and a bunch of other fees that are basically impossible to understand. This is the end result of all those financial band-aids we talked about earlier. Now imagine this instead. The AMM system allows for a bill that actually makes sense, something that looks a lot more like your phone plan. The main charge would be a stable, monthly subscription for a service level that you choose. Do you need a lot of energy? Do you put a lot of stress on the local wires? Do you need super high reliability? You just pick a tier that fits your needs, and your bill is predictable. No more hidden fees, no more volatility charge. And here's the really brilliant part, especially for anyone with an electric vehicle or a smart thermostat. Instead of having to play the market and gamble on crazy price spikes to save money, you get your reward right up front. By simply signing up for a more flexible service tier, you pay a lower, predictable subscription cost month in and month out. It's that simple, and it's fair. So, we end with this big question. What if, by shifting our focus from trading an abstract commodity to coordinating a physical system, we could build a grid that's not just more reliable and affordable, but also fairer and way better prepared for a clean energy future? It's a huge change in perspective for sure, but it might be the one that finally aligns our power bills with the actual laws of physics.